Okay, so hello and welcome back, and today we'll be talking about Houston's historic train stations. Houston was one of the many cities that had, a Union Station. We're just going to start off here. This is the outline. Talking about Union Station, the Southern Pacific's Grand Central Station, and then the Katy's downtown station very, very briefly. So Houston was one of the many cities that had a Union Station. These were train stations that were joint operations between many different railroads. This was done for a few different reasons, but usually it was either the lack of land in or around downtown, or at least desirable land. And the other one being just the railroad being cheap and not wanting to have a bunch of grand stations, so they just build one. And I already made a video a while, like months ago, about why there's so many in the U.S. and how a lot of them ended up coming into creation. But Houston had one, and this is going to be at least a very brief story of it. The story starts in 1909 when the Houston Terminal and Belt Railway commissioned designs for a new Union Station for Houston. They contracted with Warren and Wetmore, architecture firm from New York City, to design the new station. They had previously worked on Grand Central Terminal in New York City, which was fitting considering Houston's Union Station had similar architectural flourishes. This railroad had estimated the cost of the new Union Station to be about $1 million, which eventually ballooned to $5 million. The station had a lot of marble, granite, limestone, and terracotta work, which is really what ballooned the costs for this new station. After 2 years of construction and several destroyed buildings, the new Union Station was opened. And by several destroyed buildings, one of them was a synagogue, so again, don't yell at me in the comments about that. I don't want to list off every building, but the synagogue, I think, was the more important of the ones that was demolished. Anyways, back to the railroad. At the time, Houston was the main railroad hub in that part of the Southeast, Southwest, Midwest, West. Again, we'll be getting into this a little bit more in the Dallas video, but Texas really does have a bit of a identity crisis. It's both the Midwest, it's all the Midwest, it's the Midwest, the Southwest, the Southeast, and the West all at the same time. And depending on who you ask, they have a completely different opinion as to which one they actually are. So, it's one of those things. It's again, if you're going to get mad at me about saying it's the Southeast, I don't particularly care, because you guys don't exactly agree on which part of the country you guys actually belong to, regionally speaking. And that's actually one of the reasons why the Dallas one's not coming out first of this, is because, the research has been kind of a pain on that one. Anyways, Union Station was served by 17 different railroads. Some of these services included the Twin Star Rocket, the Texas Chief, the Texas Eagle, and among many other trains at its height. The busiest route was the Houston to Dallas route, which isn't too surprising since Dallas is the next biggest city near them. And Union Station remained the center of transportation in the city of Houston until 1971 and the coming of Amtrak. And the end of passenger services came in 1974 when the Lone Star, which was a successor to the Texas Chief, was rerouted to Union Station. And this wasn't the end of the station, though. The Houston Terminal and Belt Railway took over the building and used it as an office. And there was even a model railroad in the first floor, at least the part that was still open to the public at this point. But this wouldn't be the end. Living its life as an office, waiting to be demolished someday, was not the end of its, history. And this is actually the city, or not the city, but what it looks like now after it's been restored. And in this restoration process came in 1995 when the city of Houston was planning to replace the Astrodome, and the site of Union Station was chosen as one of the possible locations of the new stadium, which actually almost led to the building being completely destroyed. But instead of demolishing the station, they decided to integrate the building into the new stadium complex, and the $250 million project involved in building the whole stadium made Union Station part of the main entrance to the new stadium. And in the new building, or at least the remodeled Union Station, there's a cafe, a team store, offices, meeting spaces, and a clubhouse with a rooftop deck. And this is what the inside of the station looks like, and we'll get to what the interior looked like before it was fully renovated. And this basically has led to a revival of the station in the area around it, even though trains are no longer rolling through the immediate area. And this is actually what the station looked like in the 60s as it was declining. It was very much a blighted area. And since, the area was blighted, the station, which was abandoned at this point. The tracks were, basically big empty space for a new stadium. And this is what the interior or the Great Hall of the station looked like, the part I just showed you, when they actually opened it to the public and began the restoration project. Because you can see here, just again, a lot of the work that was done. This marble, I think it's marble, it was restored and, new paint was added. And just overall, they did a really good job restoring the station, even though, again, it's not a train station. It's still, as a historic building goes, they at least, did a pretty good job preserving it and restoring it to its former glory. Even though now it's just a baseball stadium, it's still, again, I like when buildings like this get preserved. And this is the exterior shot of the building. This left field is the entrance to the stadium, and then again, all the other fun stuff is in the building. And we're going to be getting into Grand Central Station, which was the other station within Houston. So the Southern Pacific was one of the other major railroads to serve Houston that didn't use Union Station, and the Katy is the other one, the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad. They had their own station about a mile away from Union Station. But the Southern Pacific, being its own system and stubborn, didn't want to share a station with anybody. And given that the SP had a lot of trains in and around Texas at their height, which again, see the videos elsewhere on the channel about them, so it kind of makes sense that they would want their own station. Not to mention that the tracks needed to get to Union Station were indirect and not theirs. So, again, they don't like sharing, and they probably wouldn't want to pay for track access even when they weren't unnecessarily cheap about everything. And Grand Central Station was actually a series of stations that occupied the same location. The first station being built by the Houston and Texas Central Railroad, which was a railroad that eventually was consolidated into the Southern Pacific's Texas operations. The first station was built in 1856, which I believe is this building here with the train shed on it. And the SP eventually replaced it with the 1887 train station, but I'm not sure if it's this one or not, but I think this is the 1887 building. It doesn't say on the picture, so unfortunately, sorry. After the station was rebuilt and the 1887 one, there was actually a lot of economic development around it. A bunch of hotels started springing up around the station, again, which is one of the main reasons why passenger services are a good thing. They tend to cause economic development, and hotels might not seem like much, but where there are hotels, there are people, and people need things, which means stores and restaurants and offices and other stuff will eventually start coalescing near the station. And, more dense, more walkable areas tend to have much stronger economies than areas where, your half of your, land area is used for parking. Anyways, that's a different series. But anyways, still, long story short is, have stations, have more walkability, have more passenger trains. It's a good thing. Anyways, this version of Grand Central Station was remodeled twice in 1906 and 1914. At this point, the station complex consisted of a passenger waiting area in the central part of the building, railroad offices in the east wing, along with baggage and mail facilities in the west wing, along with more offices on the second and third floors of the building. The tracks were on the north side of the building, and there was a train shed covering the tracks to protect passengers from the elements. But this station would not last forever. In 1934, the SP decided that it was time to replace it and embarked on the city of Houston on a modernization project that would see the railroad splitting a $4 million project to build a new station and fix some of the surrounding infrastructure around the station, which from what I understand was mostly city streets, and I'm guessing some flood mitigation because the station is near a bayou. And this is actually a picture of the Sunset Limited in Grand Central Station. At some point, I think this is the post-modernization one because the train shed is gone. Anyways, just, plugged in a picture of the train. And this is the new Grand Central Station that the old one got replaced with. So the first plans were drawn up in 1929 and construction started in 1933, with the new station being finished in 1934. The station had a facade of pink granite and Texas cream-colored limestone. The station building itself was large. The waiting area had a 2-story chamber with marble floors and wood finishes. There were 2 murals in the waiting room, and they were painted by a San Francisco painter named John Macquarie, showing Stephen F. Austin and Baron D. Bastrop in 1823, and the other one was of Sam Houston in 1837. There were offices and restaurants in the west wing of the station, and the east wing had the segregated waiting room for, black people, because this was the South during segregation. Again, that's also another thing. Texas is also part of the South. Other little fun bit of regional identity there. And it also had a lunch counter along with the mail and baggage facilities. And the station was eventually demolished in 1961 and replaced with a shed. And this shed is pretty much what Amtrak still uses as its Houston station today. The old station location became a post office, and the new station is again, a few blocks away from the old location. As far as I can tell, the murals were destroyed with the buildings, but I will say I didn't really look too hard into them, and there really wasn't too much to find. It was one of those where I only found like one blog post from the early 2000s saying that, yeah, it was likely destroyed, but not too much else other than how they were painted and how they were important. Again, people kind of record weird stuff, and not everything makes it onto the internet. But a lot of stuff does, so it's one of those things you got to know what to ask. Anyways, I also mentioned that the Katy had their own station in Houston, but it was all I can really tell it was about a mile away from Union Station. But I can't really find too much else about the railroad. The Katy was the original main line between Katy, Texas, and Houston, which is like just outside of Houston. And this line was abandoned. That they used was abandoned in 1997, and most of the right of way is now buried under I-10. And there's kind of a reason why they call it the Katy Freeway, and it's again something we'll have to talk about in a future installment of the urbanism series, because the whole destruction of stuff for the sake of building highways is kind of crazy and stupid. But anyways, this is going to be the end of the video talking about the historic train stations in Houston, Texas, and I hope you did enjoy and come back for the next one where we will be talking about other Texas railroad related history or possibly something else. I will see you in the next one. Oh yeah, by the way, liking and the commenting, the subscribing, also a Discord link down below. I keep forgetting to mention all of this stuff, and just thank you for the general support. Now I will see you in the next one.